Welcome, travelers, to Terrors in the Wild, where the line between myth and reality blurs in the darkest corners of the earth. Here, we unravel the most terrifying cryptids, dive deep into chilling horror stories, and explore the mysteries that haunt the wilderness. From shape-shifting monsters to forgotten legends, we uncover the creatures and tales that lurk just beyond the reach of human understanding. So, keep your wits sharp, hit that subscribe button, and prepare for a journey into the unknown. The wild is waiting, but beware. It's not just the animals you should fear.
Whispers in Black Hollow, a park ranger's horror tale. I took the job at Black Hollow National Park because I thought it would be peaceful. The vast forests, the endless trails, and the solitude, just me and nature. That was the dream. But Black Hollow wasn't like other parks. It had a history. The locals spoke in hushed tones about disappearances, about things in the woods that weren't animals. Old-timers at the general store would give you a knowing look when you mentioned hiking too deep into the trees. Don't stray from the trails, they'd say, and if you hear someone calling your name, know you didn't. I always thought it was superstition. Stories meant to keep kids from wandering too far, but after what happened last fall, I know better. I wish I had listened. Emily Carter was 24 years old, a college student visiting Black Hollow National Park for a solo photography trip. According to her friends, she had been excited to capture the sunrise from Raven's Peak, a scenic overlook known for its breathtaking views. She had arrived 3 days prior, checked in at the ranger station, and picked a designated campsite near Ashwood Clearing. Her car was still parked neatly in the lot when I arrived, locked, keys sitting on the dash, as if she had planned to return any moment. But she hadn't. I scanned the area. Her tent was still standing, zipped up and undisturbed. A folding chair sat by the fire pit, a half-empty bottle of water resting on the armrest. The firewood she had gathered was still stacked, unused. Everything was untouched. I unzipped the tent and peered inside. Her sleeping bag was still laid out, flashlight beside it. Her backpack was propped against the side, and nothing looked missing. Her phone was charging on a small portable battery pack, fully charged. But Emily was nowhere. It was as if she had simply walked away and never returned. I radioed back to the ranger station. "This is Ranger Holden. I'm at Emily Carter's campsite. No sign of forced entry, no animal activity. Everything's still here." A brief crackle. Then my supervisor, Ranger Owens, responded. "Copy that. Check the surrounding trails. Last report had her heading toward Raven's Peak before dawn." "Understood. I'll start from the campsite and work my way out." I clipped the radio to my belt and took a deep breath. The air was crisp, cool with the scent of pine. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting shifting patterns on the ground as the wind stirred the trees. It felt normal, peaceful, but something about it felt off too. I shook off the feeling and set out along the trail. Emily had left around 5:30 a.m. to catch the sunrise. The trail to Raven's Peak was well marked, about 2 miles from her campsite. It was an easy hike, well-traveled, with wooden signs every half mile. At first, everything seemed fine. I saw signs of recent activity, fresh boot prints, some slightly smudged where the dirt had shifted. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. But about a mile in, things started changing. The prints became irregular. Emily's careful steps turned into something less controlled. The pattern suggested she had started moving faster, her steps wider, uneven. Then they vanished. I stopped, scanning the trail. There was no fork, no intersecting path, just the trail stretching ahead and behind me. But Emily's prints just stopped. No sign of struggle, no drag marks, no indication that she had turned around. It was as if she had been plucked right off the trail. I felt a cold sensation creep up my spine. Then the silence came. One moment, the forest was alive with the sounds of nature. The next, everything was still. No wind, no birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. That's when I heard it, a whisper. "Help me." It was faint, barely there. A voice carried on the wind. I froze. "Emily," I called out, my voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. No response. I took a cautious step off the trail, scanning the trees. The undergrowth was dense, tangled with roots and fallen branches. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it into the woods. That's when I saw it. A single footprint. Barefoot. Human. But wrong. The foot was elongated with unnatural indentations, like the bones inside weren't structured correctly. The toes were too long, curling slightly into the dirt. And next to it, half buried beneath a layer of leaves, was Emily's camera. I knelt down, carefully brushing the leaves aside. The camera was scratched, but intact. I turned it over, my heart pounding. The lens was cracked. The power button flickered. I hesitated, then pressed it. The screen came to life, and the last image taken made my breath catch in my throat. A blurred snapshot of the trees. A dark figure standing among them, watching. And in the bottom corner of the image, just barely visible through the distortion, Emily's face, mouth open in a silent scream. Back at the ranger station, I sat at my desk staring at Emily Carter's camera. My hands felt clammy, and my breath was uneven. The last image haunted me. That figure, tall, twisted, lurking in the trees. Emily's face, blurred in motion, frozen in fear. I had seen plenty of missing persons cases in my time, but nothing like this. There were no signs of animal attack, no struggle, no footprints leading away, just nothing. I took a deep breath and plugged the camera's SD card into my computer. The files popped up, neatly organized by timestamp. I hesitated, then clicked on the first video, 5:42 a.m. The screen filled with shaky footage of the forest, bathed in the soft blue light of dawn. Emily was walking along the trail, her camera bouncing slightly with each step. She was whispering to herself, narrating. "God, this place is beautiful," she said, her voice hushed but excited. "Raven's Peak is supposed to have the best sunrise. Hope I'm not too late." She turned the camera on herself, smiling. She looked happy, unafraid. A normal video from a normal girl, enjoying nature. Then she panned the camera toward the trees, and for a split second, something moved in the background. A shadow, just for a moment, barely visible between the trees. Then it was gone. Emily didn't seem to notice. 6:10 a.m. This video was different. The camera was lower, as if she had set it on the ground or dropped it in her lap. Emily was sitting on a rock, breathing heavily. She sounded nervous. "Okay, that was weird," she murmured, barely audible. "I thought I heard something behind me, but there's no one out here." She turned the camera toward the forest. Nothing but trees. But then, a whisper. So quiet, I almost missed it. "Emily." The voice was distant, stretched thin, as if carried on the wind. Emily stiffened. She looked around quickly. "Hello?" Silence. She shook her head, laughing nervously. "Jesus, I'm freaking myself out." The video ended. 6:30 a.m. The next clip was only 10 seconds long. The camera was on the ground, angled upward. The sky was visible through the trees. But something was wrong. Emily was standing just at the edge of the frame, facing away from the camera, completely still. Her posture was rigid, her head tilted slightly. She wasn't moving. Then in the last second of the clip, her head twitched, just slightly, like a puppet on strings. The video cut to black. 6:47 a.m. I swallowed hard and clicked on the final video. The camera was moving fast, swinging wildly as Emily ran through the forest. Her breathing was ragged, panicked. Branches snapped around her. Leaves crunched underfoot. "Oh, God," she gasped, barely able to get the words out. "What is that?" The camera turned briefly. Something was behind her, tall, emaciated, with elongated limbs and a mouth stretched too wide. Black, hollow eyes locked onto the lens. The whispering returned, but now it was layered. Dozens of voices overlapping, murmuring her name. Then Emily screamed. The camera fell. The image became a blur of spinning trees and dirt. For 3 agonizing seconds, the screen was still. Then a shadow loomed over the camera. A shape crouched down, just out of focus. A hand, long fingers, too many joints, reached toward the lens. And then, static. The video ended. I sat frozen in my chair, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't normal. This wasn't an accident, or an animal attack, or a lost hiker. Emily had been taken, and something had been hunting her. A cold realization settled over me. That thing, it had been watching her, and now it had her voice. I shut the laptop and stood up, my legs shaking. Somewhere, deep in Black Hollow, Emily's voice was still whispering, calling for help. And I wasn't sure if it was really her anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the video, the way Emily stood motionless, her head twitching unnaturally, and the thing in the last frame, that stretched out figure with hollow eyes and too many joints. By morning, I knew I couldn't leave it alone. I had to go back. I told myself it was about finding answers, that I was doing my job as a ranger, that I needed to find Emily, or at least something that explained what had happened to her. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something in the woods had seen me, and I had seen it, and now I could feel it watching. I left just after dawn, retracing my steps to where I had found Emily's camera. The forest was different this time. The air felt heavier, as if the trees were pressing in on me. The further I hiked, the more unnatural the silence became. The birds had stopped singing. The wind had died. The forest was holding its breath. Then the whispering began. Soft, distant at first. "Help me." I stopped dead in my tracks. The voice was unmistakable. "Emily." I turned slowly, my skin crawling. The sound was coming from the trees, deeper in, off the trail. I knew I shouldn't follow it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn back, but my feet moved anyway, stepping off the path and into the dense undergrowth. The whispering grew stronger. "Help me. Please." The voice was wrong, warped, stretched too thin, as if it were being played through an old tape recorder. I pushed forward, ducking under low branches and stepping over thick roots. The trees grew denser, their trunks gnarled and twisted, their bark carved with strange symbols. Symbols I had never seen before. Something was waiting for me. After nearly an hour of hiking, I found it. A cave, It was nestled into the side of a ridge, its entrance a gaping black maw. Jagged rocks jutted out like broken teeth. The ground outside was littered with bones. Deer, rabbits, birds, and something human. I swallowed hard. Inside the cave, the whispering was louder now. So close, so hungry. Help me. The voice echoed from the darkness, bouncing off the walls. I took a step forward. My flashlight barely penetrated the blackness inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the whispering stopped. The silence was suffocating. And then, a shuffle. Something moved in the dark. My flashlight flickered. I froze, barely breathing. And then I saw it, a shape, unfolding from the shadows. At first, it looked like a person, thin, hunched. But as it stepped into the dim light, I saw the truth. Its arms were too long, its fingers ending in claw-like tips. Its spine jutted out through sickly pale skin, ribs protruding as if starved. And its face, oh God, its mouth was wide, too wide, stretching open far past what should have been possible. Its eyes were black pits, deep and empty, and worst of all, it was smiling, not with its mouth, but with its entire face. Its skin twitched, convulsed, like something was moving beneath it. And then, in Emily's voice, it spoke. Help me. I staggered backward, heart hammering. The thing stepped closer, its movements jerky like a marionette with its strings tangled. Then it twitched, head snapping to the side in that same unnatural way Emily had moved in the video. It knew I had seen the footage. It knew I had come looking for her. And now it was looking at me. I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the underbrush, lungs burning. The whispering followed me, rising to a fever pitch. Help me, help me, help me. Too many voices, too many mouths. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see how close it was. I just ran. The forest blurred around me, the trees stretching tall and endless. The terrain was unfamiliar now. Had I gone too deep? Had I lost the way back? Then, a shadow, just ahead. I skidded to a stop, heart slamming against my ribs. Another one, standing between the trees, its body twitching in the same broken way. Its face split open into a jagged grin. I was surrounded, and my instincts took over. I bolted sideways, cutting through the forest in a desperate sprint. The ground sloped downward, and suddenly I was tumbling, rolling through the leaves and dirt until I crashed hard against a tree trunk. Pain shot through my side, but I forced myself up, gasping. I knew where I was. The trail was just ahead. I stumbled toward it, breaking through the undergrowth onto the familiar path, and then the whispering stopped. Everything was silent again. I turned back, my body trembling. The forest was empty, no figures, no shapes, just trees, watching. I made it back to the station just before nightfall. Ranger Owens was waiting for me, arms crossed. "You went off the trail, didn't you?" he said, voice calm but firm. I nodded, still struggling to catch my breath. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "You're lucky you came back." I frowned. What the hell is out there? Owens didn't answer right away. He walked to the bulletin board behind him and tapped one of the old missing persons reports. I stepped closer. It was from 1987. A young man, last seen hiking near Raven's Peak, never found. But in the background of the faded photograph, barely visible among the trees, a shadow, watching. And suddenly, I understood. Emily was gone, and something else had taken her place. Something that could wear a voice like a mask. Something that was still out there, waiting. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it, Emily's voice, whispering from the trees. That thing had spoken in her voice, had used it like bait, and I had almost fallen for it. I lay awake in my bunk at the ranger station, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. What the hell had I seen? How many others had gone missing the same way? The missing person reports. I needed to see them again. The ranger station had records dating back decades, handwritten reports, case files, yellowed newspaper clippings. I found the oldest ones tucked away in a dusty filing cabinet in the back of the office. As I flipped through them, a pattern emerged. Every few years, someone disappeared under similar circumstances. 1956. A hunter named Daniel Grayson, last seen near Ashwood Clearing. His gear was found intact, no sign of a struggle. 1963. A group of campers reported hearing whispers at night. One of them, Mark Wheeler, left the tent to investigate. He was never seen again. 1987. A hiker named James Holloway vanished near Raven's Peak. His camera was found weeks later with a single blurred image of something in the trees. 2004. A ranger, one of our own, disappeared during a routine patrol. His radio was found broadcasting static. And now, Emily Carter, 2023. I sat back, my stomach churning. This thing, whatever it was, had been here a long time, hunting. I confronted Ranger Owens the next morning. "You knew," I said. My voice was low, but he flinched like I had shouted. He sighed, rubbing his face. "What did you see out there?" "You already know," I shot back. "The missing people, the voices, the thing in the woods. You knew, and you let me go out there anyway." He didn't answer at first, just walked over to the window, staring out at the trees. Finally, he spoke. "We don't talk about it." "That's bullshit." He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Do you really think this is something we can fight? That we can explain?" I clenched my jaw. "We have to try." He exhaled sharply. "Listen, you made it back. That's more than most can say. But if you go looking for it again, if you let it know you're trying to understand..." He shook his head. "It won't let you leave next time." I stared at him. "So that's it? We just ignore it? Let it keep taking people?" Owens gave me a long, tired look. Then he walked over to the filing cabinet, pulled out a thick folder and dropped it onto the desk. Inside were more missing person reports, dozens more. Some weren't even in the official records, just handwritten notes, faded Polaroids, dates scribbled in the margins. I felt sick. "How many?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Owens looked me in the eye. "Too many." I should have left it alone. I should have packed my bags and transferred to another park, like Owens silently hoped I would. But I couldn't. That night, I sat outside the station, staring into the dark woods. I could feel it watching me. Emily was gone, but her voice wasn't. Somewhere, in the endless stretch of trees, it was still out there, waiting, hunting, wearing her voice like a mask. And if I listened too closely, if I let myself believe, I might be next.
As this story ends, remember, out here in the wild, the terrors never truly vanish. They're always watching, waiting, If you dare to face them again, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know when the next nightmare will find you. Until then, stay safe or stay scared.